Hello, this is Todd Luck, and like most people, I don't like insects. And so, an entire planet filled with giant bugs sounds absolutely terrifying. Unless, of course, you were riding them into battle. This is a review of Sectaurs, Warriors of Symbion, the three-issue miniseries from Oni Press that just recently wrapped up. All three issues are available at comic retailers right now, as well as online at Comixology, and I'm sure they'll probably be collected in trade paperback at some point. And yes, indeed, this is a miniseries about insect people who go medieval on each other while flying around on giant bugs. And if you say to yourself, like, gosh, that sounds like that'd make a great toy line, well, of course, that's because it was one. Sectaurs was a toy line back in the 1980s, and the most memorable feature of it was that the giant bugs they rode around on were actually hand puppets that the kids could control. Now, it was a short-lived toy line, but it was bought up in recent years by the Nacelle Company, which puts out documentaries like The Toys That Made Us, and they've been buying up lesser-known toy properties and bringing them back. And so they've already put out new figures of both Prince Dargon and Stellara, and these are sized to fit in with the old figures, and Stellara was a figure that was planned back in the day that never came out. And there's also already a variant of Dargon, the night fighting variant, which is a Walmart exclusive. And yes, Nacelle has actually gotten their figures into Walmart, and so that includes the other properties they've bought up, RoboForce and Biker Mice from Mars, and they're calling the whole thing Nacelleverse. So this end cap is at select Walmarts, and so you can search online for something like Sectaurs and click on one of the figures and then check the local availability to see if the Walmart in your area has this kiosk. It's an end cap that would be in the electronics section. These figures are a little bit cheaper at Walmart than they have been, but you can get them other places. You can go on the Nacelleverse website. You can go on online toy retailers like Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth. And the toys are just the beginning. They're going to get each of these properties into animation, and they're planning animated miniseries for Sectaurs and all those other properties. Now, while we don't have any word about where those animated series would air, we do have comics to act as a prologue to them, starting with Nacelleverse Zero, and this had all the characters in it from their different properties, and you'll notice the ones I mentioned, RoboForce, Biker Mice from Mars, Sectaurs. They also have Power Lords, which don't have figures yet, and Great Garloo, which does have an actual small figure that is available at Walmart and everywhere else. This was followed by a three-issue miniseries of RoboForce. This is the new version from Nacelle, and I did a review of this miniseries. After that, we got a three-issue miniseries of Biker Mice from Mars. And after that, we got 3 issues of Sectaurs, which just wrapped up. And up next will be Power Lords. So I've already done a review of this first issue, so why don't we take a look at all of the covers for the miniseries at once. So all of the miniseries have covers by the incredible Dustin Weaver, who is amazing at all of them. And each miniseries has 3 covers that connect together to form one image with all of the characters in that particular franchise. And I gotta tell you, he does a very, very impressive job on all of them, but I think Sectaurs may be my favorite so far. And it just looks really great. All of the characters are spot on. The composition is fantastic. You know, the detail on all of the characters and their insects is just really, really awesome. It is beautiful, beautiful stuff. I mean, if a cover is worth $5 for you, this might be enough to sell you on this alone. My only gripe here is on this last cover for issue 3. There is a disconnect between the artist and the graphic designer here. And for some reason, the layout of the cover doesn't coincide with how they laid out the graphics. And poor Skulk at the end there is covered up in the right corner. He is a pretty cool character. He's actually the Queen's stepson, and I'm sorry that he got covered up there. I'm not even sure why that corner box needs to be that big. I just wish there had been a little bit better coordination, but it's not a deal breaker. It's still a very, very nice cover. I think the most divisive thing about the miniseries is going to be the artwork. And so the artwork is not your traditional detailed fantasy style artwork we've seen in the past with the series. It is more anime inspired, it's less detailed, less backgrounds, but I think it does work in a lot of places. In a lot of places, it looks really good. It's not perfect, but it's definitely getting the job done. Now, this is not the first time that Sectaurs has had comics. Back in the 80s, when the property was out, there was an 8-issue series by Marvel Comics. The realistic fantasy style artwork that they had could at times be very, very good. And the story had its moments as well, though at times it did feel a little bit dry and convoluted as they had to keep explaining everything over and over again and kind of got caught up in this kind of Cold War that was happening between the Shining Realm and the Dark Domain. And it was one of those series where they felt the urge to put in every character in the franchise in almost every issue and have them all fight. There was also an animated miniseries that had a greatly simplified story, and it focused mainly on just them on an epic quest to find a hive, and they would run across different creatures and different monsters in every episode. And it was just a sense of high adventure that felt very much like the old Filmation Masters of the Universe, and that to me is the highest compliment I can give because I'm a huge He-Man fan. There were also many comics that were included with the figures, and arguably I think this may have been the best portrayal of the Sectaurs story back in the 80s because these were able to include all of that complicated, convoluted stuff from the Marvel series, but it was able to do it in a exciting, action-oriented way where they would go someplace interesting, and most importantly, they would focus on one or two characters per mini comic, and I think that helped a whole lot. So when I did my review of the RoboForce miniseries, I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. And the reason why it worked, and I've discovered this when I look at other comics and animation of old 80s toy lines, is that it works best when you focus in on a small group of characters. This focused on mainly two characters, but it let them really develop it and come up with a satisfying story for those two characters. Yes, it feels a little bit small compared to all of the other stuff they have in this particular franchise, but it works for the space that they have. So this miniseries tries to focus on Dargon as its main character, and Prince Dargon is the lead character of the franchise of Sectaurs. He is the Prince of the Shining Realm, and when we saw him in the 80s, he was this heroic, confident warrior and leader. Here, he's just starting out. He's not quite there yet. He's actually just trying to tell a bond with his giant insect, which is something that's supposed to be really basic for people on Symbion, but he's having some difficulty. And that's played up for humor, but it's nothing over the top or silly. The humor here works. Dargon is surrounded by his supporting cast of friends who try to support him. And of course, things are going to happen. They're going to end up in a fight with the Dark Domain. And there are actual new characters here that we didn't see back in the 80s, back in the comics or the animation. And that's kind of cool to see, right? There is some one-on-one action between Dargon and General Spydrax that is choreographed, but there's also a lot of the group fight scenes that, were in the old series. But here they're just kind of, they just kind of exist, right? They're there to fill panels just to let us know these battles existed. They're not particularly choreographed. It's probably just they fight in the script. And even though this is Dargon's story, there are a lot of subplots for the other characters that are shoved in here that probably don't need to be here if they didn't contribute to the main storyline. and they probably should have just been saved for the animated series where they have more time. And particularly the Pensor having a crush on Stellara subplot. I understand that that is in the 80s. I think they're a cute couple, but does Pensor have to talk about his crush every single time he opens his mouth? I felt like Stellara was just going to slug him by the end of this storyline. And Dargon's arc is pretty typical stuff, nothing particularly surprising or deep. It's fine, it's solid stuff, but nothing to write home about. What I actually did find to be particularly interesting, though, is that they actually gave us a king for the Dark Domain that we hadn't seen in the 80s, which I thought was really cool. I'm not going to spoil what he looks like or what happens to him, but I thought that was really cool. And we also got to see a little bit more of Dargon's father than we normally do, and I liked his design as well. Another thing I appreciated about this comic was that it stood on its own. It doesn't tie into the other Nacelleverse comics as far as I could tell. Now, there are Sectaur characters who are somehow appearing in the other miniseries, and I don't even know how that's possible, but to be blunt, I don't really care. I think Sectaurs is its own world, and stories like this probably should be unconnected to what's going on in, say, Biker Mice from Mars or something like that. So do I recommend this? Well, I think it depends on who you are. If you're into Sectaurs already and you don't mind the $5 cover price, of course you're going to want to pick this up. If you're into Nacelleverse and you don't mind the cover price, you're going to want to pick this up. If you're not into either of those things and you want to try this out, if you don't mind the cover price, you don't mind the artwork, I'd say go for it. It's not a perfect comic, but very few of them are. All right, guys, that's it for Sectaurs, Warriors of Symbion. And so I will probably be doing a review of Power Lords when it comes out. It should come out, I guess, next month. And so I'll do a review of the first issue and then do a review like this when the miniseries is complete. So like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.